So greetings, University Council, and thank you for gathering here today. I'm going to take the chair's prerogative to make a few brief remarks before I introduce President Schafer for his budget address. When we last met in December of 2015, I asked you to think about trust as a campus issue. I used an extended metaphor of the USS UND, the ship upon which we all work, to talk about the collaboration of administrators, faculty, staff, and students necessary to keep our ship from foundering. And I asked you to consider what ship we wanted to be: the Bounty, the Pequod, the Titanic, or the Beagle. The obvious answer was the Beagle. And if you're interested, that's reprinted on the Senate webpage. Since then, I have heard many conversations about trust, primarily with the message that we need to trust each other enough to do our jobs without everyone having oversight over everyone else. That was part of my message, and I hope that we reach that level of trust in the near future. But there was another part that I would like to talk a bit more about that I'm not sure was heard, a more immediate need for trust, and that is the trust for collaboration. Trust also means opening up difficult discussions so that all parties can be and feel involved. Trust means working through the difficult and painful feelings that come with conflict, knowing that with conflict, when attended to, comes greater understanding and trust. As President Schafer is about to discuss, we're in a sensitive time at our university, what some might call a crisis, though I know he doesn't prefer that word. I once heard that the Chinese character for crisis is made up of two other combined characters: dangerous and opportunity. I asked my friend Colleen, our former Chinese professor, about that and found out that that's not exactly the case, but I still like that idea of a crisis being a dangerous opportunity. I know that painful decisions are being made and grueling conversations being held all across campus, with more to come. But it is my hope, and I know that Ed and many of you share this hope, that we can seize this dangerous opportunity to further mutual trust and participate in greater campus collaboration. We'll be having a conversation in months to come about campus priorities. We should have the trust to have this conversation come from the ground up. We will be discussing budgets. Again, with trust, these decisions should come from the ground up. We certainly don't need to collaborate on every decision. We have to trust that work is being done all across campus with all of our best interests at heart. But we do also have to trust each other enough to cooperate on the really important decisions. I've been proud in recent weeks to see this kind of thinking across campus, as administrators of the highest level have been willing to share information and strategy with those of us in the Senate and elsewhere across campus. It has become my mantra to say that information is good, but input is better. Honestly, input is more difficult. But perhaps part of the answer to how we can foster campus input lies in the University Council better using the excellent tool of the University Senate, which has been, through the Senate proper and its 23 standing committees and now 4 ad hoc committees, especially busy this year engaging in collaborative governance. Some of these collaborative initiatives involve working with Staff Senate to conduct the employee engagement survey that is to be administered next week, working with student government to create the revised student evaluations of teaching that are being piloted now, and meeting with members of the legislature to talk about shared issues and offer faculty and the Senate as a resource as they are making policy, and much more. Ed talks about rolling up our sleeves during this time of crisis. In the Senate, we have our sleeves rolled up to the shoulder and have for some time now. We have been working and want to continue to create the climate of trust that I have been promoting, where administrators, faculty, staff, and even students join together to actively participate in the difficult choices this dangerous opportunity demands. Thank you. And with that, I would like to welcome our president, Ed Schafer, to speak about the budget.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the invitation to join this official University Council meeting today, and please let me take this opportunity, Becky, to thank you for your service. I think that you have shown that your service to the Council and to the Senate and to the University and to the people of North Dakota has been extraordinary. You're a great leader, and you've steered the ship of the USS UND well. So thanks again. I want to take this opportunity to have a campus-wide discussion about our budget challenges. And by the way, I see that some of you are drinking and eating and having a merry time, and please continue to do so. And talk to your neighbor, click your glasses, get up, walk out, whatever the case may be. As a former governor, I'm used to addressing the legislature. But thank you all for joining us for sure. I especially want to thank First Lady Nancy for joining us too. I think she's much interested to find out if my comments here today are going to match those that I give to the mirror in the morning when I'm getting ready. Hopefully they'll be a little more refined. But I do thank you. As I stepped on campus, I was excited about the buzz of activity, the exploration of learning, the beautiful campus with brand new facilities, and the sense of community that was here at the University of North Dakota. Now, that was back in the fall of 1964. But that's when I kind of loaded my earthly possessions, well, at least my stereo and those nifty white bucks that I had. I loaded them into my car and headed off to UND from Bismarck. I was filled with the imagination of what college life would bring and how my parents waved goodbye. I remember thinking that they were confident and trusting. And now I realize they were kind of mostly just relieved that I was out of the house. But that trip started my lifelong relationship with this university. And I do credit my time here with molding, shaping, and preparing me for life's adventures. I have been blessed beyond words since my days here as a student. I've been surrounded by a wonderful family and had a successful career in business. And as my dear Nancy and I entered our public service, we were lifted up into leadership positions that allowed us to influence the affairs of our state and our nation. Hopefully, some of it was positive along the way. But we've traveled the world, we've met and worked with fascinating people, we attended extraordinary events, and I believe that it was the beautiful setting right here on the coulee that allowed me to meet the accomplishments that are now credited to my account. It was here where I learned how to, learn, how to discover and how to communicate. I found out how to interact with those people who are different from me, people with different likes and dislikes, different ideas, different cultures, even Democrats. I learned that there were consequences to my actions and that I had to be resourceful. I really learned that if I wanted to perform, I needed to make a commitment to identify and complete what was required. I was prepared to do that because of my education here at UND. And now, here I am back on the UND campus. It's a huge honor for Nancy and me to serve as President and First Lady as we prepare this university for our new leader, hopefully to be named soon. It has been a real thrill to rediscover the university as we have come back. My stepping on to this campus in an official capacity has helped me more fully realize the focus on excellence that is here. I see top-notch programs and unbelievable, exciting, fascinating facilities all over. Students are engaged in the learning process and excited to be here. Dedicated staff who have been employed for decades have spent their entire careers here taking care of the university. We have faculty who learn and explore publish, and transfer knowledge to our students. And I'm convinced that we are providing a learning experience that is serving our students and our state well. And my mission here is to build on that foundation, to create a stronger, better university that is financially stable while providing value to all those who are involved. And we have some challenges to do that. An operating budget for sure, but also some ongoing issues, such as aging facilities, academic programs that are fundamentally changing, and increased costs to comply with federal mandates. To meet those challenges, we're going to have to reshape our budget, the budget looking at each of our units directly. And I want to be clear, this isn't something that we want to do. This isn't something that we set out to do. This is something we are being forced to make these adjustments because of budgetary realities. All of our sources of revenue will be under pressure for the foreseeable future. The federal government is broke with a debt of over $18 trillion, an annual $500 billion budget deficit that's adding to that debt every second of every day. That reality means we will not be seeing any increase in federal dollars coming into our institution. Student debt continues to plague us, and it is agonizingly high. We can't continue to transfer increases to the budget onto tuition and stack on that problem for our students. And I believe when the North Dakota legislature meets next year, we'll see greater revenue shortfalls than we see right now, and continued reductions in budget statewide will take place. And to put it simply, that just means we have no choice but to turn to the knowledge and the expertise that we have right here on campus. And we'll use these challenges to generate a budget that is fiscally responsible with the wise use of our North Dakota taxpayer dollars. We will recreate a budget that allows us to stand strong here on the prairie with solid buildings and fully equipped classrooms. We'll be able to move our salaries to reflect the excellence in our faculty, and be competitive with other institutions to make sure we're able to attract them and retain them. And we'll be able to provide the jobs and careers for staff and support personnel. We will invent a new university here that will be a strong beacon of knowledge and pride for all to see. And that's going to be a tough job. We have to go through some difficult times. But I am totally convinced that we will emerge from this budget process in a better place. So let's talk about how we're going to accomplish this Herculean task. The first problem we had was to close the budget gap for the 2016 budget. This gap resulted from over-budgeted expenditures when planned revenues from tuition didn't materialize. And in good UND fashion, we met that problem head on. As Becky said, we rolled up our sleeves and got to work. Each division, school, each college chipped in by tapping reserves and finding available dollars necessary to tackle some extraordinary repairs and other priority expenses. And then when it all started to look better, our governor, Jack Dalrymple, was put to the difficult position of having to mandate that all state agencies cut their budgets to account for a significant decrease in planned revenues. So now, on top of everything else, we have to address a $9.5 million budget reallotment for UND and a $3.1 million for the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Also, we have identified some crucial needs for our university that will need to be funded. So overall, we have a greater challenge than even the mandated cutback. And here's one example, our power plant. Dave Chakraborty tells me that every morning the folks in facilities knock on wood, that the steam boilers continue to provide heat to the more than 230 buildings across our campus. Now, this has been a pretty mild winter, but can you imagine what would happen in the coldest times if those boilers didn't kick in? Well, I don't think we want to find out. And that means we're faced with finding $20 million. And that's the cost to bring the steam plant up to speed. That will make sure that we have heat and a safe, comfortable environment for our students to get the education that we will provide, and for all of us to do the work that we need to do. So, how do we do all of this? How do we manage the challenges to take care of projects like our steam plant and continue to work toward our priorities as an institution? How do we reshape UND to focus on areas of excellence and continue a pattern of promoting the best of the best? My experience tells me that the answer, while it certainly is not easy, is really quite simple to understand. We must prioritize our programs and policies and put our precious revenues to work by fully funding those priorities. Now, I've been through budget challenges before. As governor of North Dakota, we had some big financial challenges in the 1990s. It's something that is not fun. It's not something that we want to do, but it's essential if we're going to meet the situation by focusing on our points of excellence. So that when we're done, we'll have a stronger and better institution, a place where we have engaged and well-paid faculty, where staff and administration can forge satisfying long-term careers, and where students graduate with an excellent educational experience, preparing them for their careers and preparing them to be actively engaged in their communities. And so how do we do that? How do we determine what the priorities are? And when we determine those priorities, how do we fund them? The answers do not come from the president's office or from Twomley Hall. The expertise to set the priorities come from the grassroots level, those who are on the front lines, who see up front and personal how we spend our money and what works best. This isn't about the administration saying, these are your priorities. This is about the ability of each unit to prioritize what they do. I had a friend talking about priorities who handed me these 3 candy kisses. I have a red one, a rose one, and a silver one. And he said, okay, you talk about priorities. How would you prioritize those 3 pieces of candy? And I said, I don't know. That's a difficult situation. I know that all 3 of them are good. I've experienced all 3 of them. I've eaten all 3 of them. I know they're satisfying. But if you're telling me I have to prioritize them, I have to figure out a way to do it. And that means I might weigh them, and one might be a little weightier than the others. It might mean I like red better. It might mean I have an experience in the past with one of them in a bag that was stale or something. I mean, somehow I have to create a way to prioritize these 3 good, nice pieces of candy in my hand. And that's the difficult task that we're facing here at UND today, is how to make those priorities, how to rank them, and how to fund them properly with the dollars that we have in hand. As each unit goes through this process, I have some institutional parameters to keep in mind. We will generate the unit priorities first to fit under an umbrella of overarching priorities for the university. Our first priority is to provide stimulating educational experiences and advancement and excitement in the classroom by creating the best possible student learning experience. Secondly, we will serve the people of the state of North Dakota through scholarship, research, creative activity, as well as through our service programs. And number 3, we will provide long-lasting, affordable, and permanent career opportunities for employees, faculty, staff, and administration. And it's my intention to use the budget challenges we face to meet these 3 goals. The conversation about reshaping UND's budget is certainly much broader than just meeting the immediate need to address the allotment and to balance our budget. It encompasses everything that we do. And I want to make it clear, in keeping with those institutional priorities that I just outlined, I believe it is important to hold any rate increases that impact students to an absolute minimum. Doing so will require added discipline to the process to control costs, to find efficiencies, and to prioritize our efforts. As I said in my message to the campus on February, we must take the next steps to identify options and opportunities to reduce our costs. And we're talking about net permanent reductions in operating costs. We're asking division and units to plan for a 95% budget and a 90% budget in developing proposals and recommendations. And this is across all sources of funding. Will be used to address the needs now and as well as help plan for the longer term. And I believe that these 2 levels, a potential 5% reduction and a potential 10% reduction, will provide us with the flexibility and also with the significant enough impact to bring the budget into necessary alignment. The academic and administrative units are already engaging in discussions and proposals focused on identifying high priority programs and sources of potential income growth too. They also are looking at the identification of lower priority programs and services for reduction. They're looking at savings identified through workload and productivity process improvements and opportunities for restructuring. They're looking at consolidation and sharing of services to decrease costs. And the long-term goal, as I mentioned, must be met with reductions in operating costs. Spending from all sources of funds should be scrutinized to ensure resources are applied to the highest priorities with a focus on what is best for the students and the future of UND. A target date for initial proposals and recommendations to be submitted to the deans with their department chairs and directors is submitted by the deans and the department chairs and directors to the respective vice presidents is March 15th, 2016, next week. The vice presidents will make recommendations to the president for their respective divisions no later than April 1st, 2016. And I will make the final decisions on these recommendations, and the target date for those final decisions is April 15th, just a month from now. Last month, to assist the university in identifying opportunities, I directed a number of steps which are now being implemented. And I think you can refresh that communication on the president's website. But now, against the 3 institutional priorities that I have outlined and the supporting priorities that each of your units will establish, I again need to be clear. We will live within our means. And that requires addressing our diminishing budgets. This was one of the principles articulated last fall as the budget discussions began, and it is still an operating principle. And these principles are this: changing in spending decisions must be made. Programs will drive the budget. We will continue to actively pursue ways to initiate growth and generate revenue. We will focus on programs and initiatives that support the core mission of this university. All sources of funds will be scrutinized. And we will minimize negative impact on priority academic programs and student services. So how do the 95% and the 90% budgets come into this picture? This process is intended to free up within each unit a 5 to 10% of the budget to reallocate to priority purposes. The base budgeting approach is not meant to be a one-time exercise. This is the way we will be budgeting in the future. And this is what will allow us to work as units to work toward priorities that each unit sets for itself under the framework of our older overarching priorities. And as I've already mentioned, by going through this process, you are going to be forging the pathway for the new university. I realize this is going to take some time to institute this budget. For instance, we're not going to scare up $20 million to fix the steam plant today, but we might scare up $4 million to start the process and build a 5-year program to make it happen. We're going to have to see how those unfold. The budget cuts that we need to make to balance the the fiscal year 17 budget, as well as meet the governor's call, must be determined now. The 90% and the 95% budgets reflect on what we need to do to meet the long-term health and survival of this university. And I want to be sure about one more thing. Positions will be eliminated as part of this process. No one wants to see this happen. But in order to arrive at a stronger university for the future, we're going to have to make some tough decisions. And our first responsibility is to our existing UND family. We will handle any job eliminations and transition in the most family-oriented way that we can. This planning will take place over time, so there won't be instantaneous removals. Retraining programs and counseling services will be provided. And I think we can all imagine how we want to keep people on this university and maybe move them into other positions or areas so that they remain part of UND. I should also point out that we're offering opportunities that might help us identify ways to cut staffing costs without eliminating those jobs of people who want to stay. For example, in February, we announced the Tenured Faculty Voluntary Separation Incentive Program. The university has taken this step to reduce the salary and benefits and wage costs and to redirect the allocation and appointment of positions to maximize the university's ability to fulfill its mission on a continuing basis. Just this afternoon, we announced a limited time staff voluntary separation incentive program as well. And of course, if teaching courses are affected, we'll make sure that students can maintain their pathway to graduation. We can provide independent study or waivers or other methods so that students can meet their course requirements and graduate on time. And if athletic scholarships are affected, they will be honored if programs are cut. So we have to have some financial challenges ahead of us. But I believe that UND is well positioned to meet these fiscal issues head on, to roll up our sleeves and to work together to reshape our budget, to reshape this university so that it will be stronger and more well positioned for the future. The inside cover of my UND diploma contains the Pledge of Graduates. As I go out, I pledge myself to live up to the ideals of my university and to take my place on the side of right with the best light that I have. Now, I repeat that pledge today as I look forward to working with all of you to shine the light on this university and to make sure that we continue along the path of UND exceptionalism. We will be the best of the best. I very much look forward to working with you as we accept these challenges of reshaping and redirecting our budgets. And I leave you with this passage from the book of Colossians. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Godspeed in your efforts.
The President will now take questions, and I will let him, are you okay taking questions?
I am okay to take questions.
I'll just let him introduce you.
Yes.
My name is Megan Maxwell. I'm an assistant professor in the music department. I'm the director of the music therapy program. And I heard you talk a lot about this is a ground-up process. We're looking at what are departmental priorities, unit priorities. And I come from a department that has very clearly made music therapy a priority. It's approximately 30% of our music department. Approximately half of our wind ensemble is music therapy students. That is the group that plays at commencement. And as of right now, the plan in the College of Arts and Sciences is to cut the music therapy program. We will lose 30% of the music department. And the department, so my question is, we've been asked to create departmental priorities and unit priorities. Are the priorities that we identify actually going to be honored?
First of all, thank you for pointing out the impact, that is coming when we make these decisions. Not only is it affecting a third of your department, but it's affecting all the auxiliary benefits in the community of those folks playing in ensembles and bands.
And providing clinical services to hundreds of people within the community.
Exactly. So, it's an important thing. And what I mentioned before is I don't think that the priorities ought to be set in Twomley. I don't think the priorities ought to be set by me. I think each unit has to set their priorities to say what makes sense in this unit. So I look forward to seeing your priorities as you set them, and as that works up the chain, how those priorities, match those overarching principles of the university and how that shapes up. I hope that you are championing this program and that you believe, obviously, it's a priority, and it sounds like it's a priority. But as I said, we have to make difficult decisions with our pieces of candy to figure out what those priorities are. And I hope that in this process that we can make the case that this particular program, bless you, the particular program of the music therapy, I hope it ends up as being one of the priorities. You've outlined the impact, and certainly that impact has to be something taken into consideration as we set the priorities. The difficult thing here is putting the process together to identify the priorities. And once those priorities are identified, we have to look at each and every one and say, this one might not be, we might run out of money before we get to this one on our priority list, but it might be a necessary program for the university to deliver. I mean, this might be something that, has a broader community support or, a small but necessary delivery, whatever the case may be. We have to assess those kinds of things. It isn't just an automatic line where the money runs out. It might be a program, not using yours as an example, but it might be a program that doesn't make the priority list that we can consolidate or figure out how to make it operate better, get some outside revenues, try to make it work. And it may be a program that just doesn't make the priority list and it's not going to be funded. But as we go through the process, we don't know yet how to set those priorities until they get flushed up through the system. And then we get a chance to really sit down and match them against the overarching goals of the university. So you point out a very difficult and painful thing, and I certainly appreciate that. But I'm also convinced that the process can work so that we can match our revenues to our priorities and get this job done. Yes?
President Schafer, my name is Tom Petros. I'm in the psychology department. I've been here for 36 years. we've done a lot of this before. And my question is, I understand your logic behind the 95 and 90% cuts and so on to identify priorities at the unit level. However, I'm a little confused when you mentioned the decisions about where our campus is going should be made at Twomley, but all those things go through the deans and they make their way up to you. For me to be an actively engaged member of this campus community, I want to know that you're going to, that when somehow biology emerges to the top and psychology goes to the back, where do you see faculty having input into those broad decisions? You've outlined those 3 principles and we've all done that through our professionalism in good times and bad times, at least in my 36 years here. And so who's going to make those decisions? Or maybe a better way to phrase my question is, how do you foresee the role of faculty in making those higher level decisions?
I see the role of faculty in generating the priority list. I see the role of faculty as passing those the generated lists of priorities, scheduling, onto the department chairs and onto the deans to get flushed through the system. I see the role of my office as saying we're going to take those priorities that are passed through the faculty, through the deans, to the office, and say how are they going to meet the priorities of the university, and we're going to make those decisions in Twomley. Thanks, Tom. Yes, sir.
I'm Bill Sheridan, professor of biology. I have not grown weary, although this is my 41st year at this campus. I well remember 1989, when the legislature increased taxes and people rolled them back by a vote of 66%. And yet, this has been very helpful today when you very forthrightly informed us that this 95%, 90% budget exercise aims to free up some funds to reallocate. And you've spoken about priorities. Well, I'm a biology professor, and Tom referred to us. In February, we once again, after first opportunity to do it, once again was chosen as the outstanding research department in the university. And yet we're being asked to cut one of our research staff members. Now, as a matter of fact, our priority, I think, in biology would be perhaps to add one. And so we don't have an opportunity to say, here's the priorities for how we can get better. All we can do is say, here's the priorities that would be most sensitive to a degradation of our programs that we must protect, and therefore, here's the sacrificial lamb. That's not a prioritizing process at all. So I'm personally quite disappointed with this whole scenario that we're going to have to shrink our budget when in fact oil prices have come back up to $40 a barrel. There's predictions it'll be stabilized at 50. Don't you really see this as a temporary depression in our economy that North Dakota will bounce back from?
I think there are several questions, in there. Maybe I'll take the last one first. Is this a temporary blip in our economy that, we will return from? Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And we have 2 major pieces of our economy, agriculture and energy. Both of them are cyclical pieces of our economy. Both go up and down. In the 1980s that you spoke about, both of those sectors of the economy dipped on the bottom at the same time, and we collapsed our state. And you mentioned 1989. I was elected in 1992, and I got to inherit that bad economy and all the bad budget and the difficulty of revenue matching to the priorities of the state of North Dakota. And we went through the same process. And this kind of goes back to Tom's comment, about how do you set the priorities and who decides, et cetera. When we went through this process, we went through the same process on a much larger scale, obviously. And we said, we're going to set those priorities. We use the same process of flushing them up through the system. We built the overarching priorities of the state so that people knew when they're making those priorities, they knew to make them to fit under those priorities. And then we made decisions to do so. And we provided a fiscally sound, strong financial foundation. And in the next 10 years, North Dakota had the highest economy in the United States of America. And that happened because we created a sound, fiscally responsible foundation. And we're going to do that at UND as well. And when that economy comes back, when things, when we've gained the trust of the taxpayers back, when we have seen our legislative process and maybe a governor that's come to the senses, about making cutbacks, when we see that come back, then we are going to be perfectly positioned to be able to get increased revenues and focus them again on the priorities of the university as we have defined it. So it's really about, yes, it's going to come back, and secondly, it's going to be positioned well to take advantage of it when it does come back. And in the past, in the 1980s, in the beginning of the 1990s, one of the kind of cultural elements of North Dakotans and North Dakota in general is when we're facing the storm, we kind of dash off to the root cellar and wait out the storm. And we did that with our budgets. We did it with our budgets here at UND. And so we said, let's skim off some maintenance and put it into operations. And now we have a $20 million problem in our steam plant. We said, let's just not fill some positions and take that money and use it for others. And then we said, well, we have overworked faculty. We have people that can't perform. We've built too much to do in our system, and we don't have enough money to pay for it. I don't want to get into those same situations of sliding this off to the future. I think it's really important that we live within our means today and use that to build the foundation and basis of this university that will make it so much stronger when times of good return. I don't quite agree with you on how fast they'll be returning. I don't think $50 oil is predicted. I'm not sure we're going to see it. But the reality is, we're going to go through a legislative session that's going to evaluate all of those issues. They're going to, try to predict the economy. They did a pretty crummy job last time. But they're going to try to predict the economy. They're going to, put the expenditures next to the university. And you know what? If they give us more money, we're going to have the perfect model to put those dollars to work at this university. So that's the way I see the process working. Yes?
So, President Schafer, going into the next session, do you see the steam plant being a priority since it's a health and safety issue? Or is it not really that bad? Because the reason I bring that up is in the last session, I didn't see a lot of discussion about the steam plant. Here, I saw a lot of that Valley City, where there was significant issues, especially the way that natural gas is delivered to that campus. So, do you see then moving forward that you would recommend to the incoming president that this might be a priority item on a safety and health and wellness of the campus? I mean, clearly if steam goes down, we're in a world of hurt. So could you address that? And then I have a secondary follow-up question.
Yes, I can. Thanks, Eric. And I'm Ed, by the way.
Well, I know that. We're in public.
Well, we're also on the same team. We had a discussion today with the Chancellor's cabinet about how to approach the next legislative session. And I don't know what happened in the past. I'm not much concerned with what happened in the past of the steam plant, whether it was presented and knocked down or not presented, or where it went in the mix. That really isn't important. Today we have a $20 million problem. And we have people walking in that plant every day saying, I hope it stays working. And that's not a good idea. But the discussion that we had with the Chancellor's cabinet is this. I have talked with the Office of Management and Budget. I've talked with Legislative Council. I've talked with the Governor's office. And there is no appetite for any increased spending in this upcoming session. And so my advice to the chancellor was, we can't even expect capital projects, necessarily capital projects, to be funded. And that means we have to find it internally. You know, and I'm not convinced that we can't do it. I mean, I think we can. And I think in the perfect case of the $20 million, you know, there's a schedule of maintenance at that facility. And so if you look at saying, okay, if we did it all today, it's 20 million. Actually, it's probably closer to 30. But if we look at that and how you schedule that out, you know, do we get 4 million in a year and 4 million the next and 3 then? I don't know, but we're going to schedule that out. The other thing I can tell you is we provide steam to Altru. Maybe Altru should be picking up some of the tab here on, you know, trying to solve that boiler problem. So we're going to look at every way we can to get that done without legislative help, recognizing that the safety and environmental security of this campus is important to us. And we can't rely on the legislature, the federal government, the state government, increased tuition. You know, we're not going to find it. We're going to build it internally as we go through this budget process.
And a follow-up question, I guess, is really focused on the board edict that the academic progress of students and the academic programs that students are in will not be hampered by the budget issues that we face. And one of my concerns is, what are we doing at UND to make sure that the deans have that message, that the department chairs have that message, and that they really understand what that message means? Because my concern is, as a colleague from music enunciated, you know, music therapy is a relatively large program within that department. I don't know all the details. I know you don't know all the details, but on that music therapy department, I have no idea, you know, how that works. But the point is, that's where a concern comes in. If we start losing significant programs, you know, that's an issue, because that's one of the issues that we're supposed to absolutely avoid at all costs. And so, have you given that message all the way broadly across the spectrum of decision makers and those that are providing you the flowing up input?
I have to say that we are faulty in spreading this message, you know, about how we're going to tackle the budget. I wanted to do this 2 weeks ago, you know, I wanted to do it before that. We needed to gather certain information to be able to, you know, kind of assemble some sense of what's going on here to be able to make this presentation. I am hoping that this presentation is the start of the understanding on campus, campus-wide, of how we're going to approach this issue. And we hope to, we're going to, you know, post a podcast of this on the president's website. I would urge you to talk to your colleagues and your friends and your coworkers to view it, to see how we're going to approach this. And we will, by the effort of the budgeting process, be pushing this message down through the ranks so that when we make the priority decisions, and back to Tom's point, you know, who's going to make them? If we make those decisions based on the overarching priorities of the university, then they're going to fit. And as that gets put up through the system, again, I am confident that we'll be able to reshape the budget so that it works for the university.
Thank you.
Yes?
So would you identify academic programs then specifically as an overarching priority of the university?
I gave the 3 arching program, and I don't think it's specific programs.
No, I don't mean specific
Yeah.
programs, but would you, like if you had to say, given all the different main,
Yeah.
I mean, they're organized,
Yeah.
I mean, are academics the top priority?
I think the student learning experience is the top priority. Obviously, academics fits in that. I'm assuming you're talking about, well, you know, do we take athletic dollars and put them into faculty, or do we take faculty dollars and put them into athletics, or whatever the case may be? Each one of those difficult decisions is going to be weighed as to what's best for the student learning experience here on campus. And obviously, the biggest part of the student learning experience here is on campus is faculty, staff, and program. So, you know, how that fits in, we don't know yet. But, you know, we have to do it. And for instance, sometimes there are programs that when you first look at them, you go like, is that really a priority of the university versus a program? And, you know, I was reminded that yesterday a person came in to see me in the office. And by the way, as we talk about these priorities, as we grapple with trying to set those priorities, my email, my phone number, and Pat Bonet's back there, you know, who runs my schedule. And, you know, I'm available. We want to get your input. We need your input on this stuff. But yesterday, someone came into the office. I think it was yesterday. Could have been a month ago. I don't know. But, you know, shortly, a while ago, somebody came in the office and said, I have heard that the Pride has been cut. And that means the marching band isn't going to, or the, you know, the pep band isn't going to be at our national championship games, etc. And I told him that we had thoroughly discussed this in the office and weighed whether those dollars that would go to the spirit and pride and character of the university were something that was taken away from dollars that would go to the academic experience of our students. And in that case, we had decided to say we're going to release the funds to make sure that our pride of UND, is going to be a part of the student experience here at the University of North Dakota. And so I was able to ask him, as he said, I heard the pride's being cut. I was able to ask him, was that right before or right after we restored the funds? You know, I'm not sure. But the point is, you know, we need to go through every single one of those processes to make these decisions. It's not easy. It's not good. But if we keep under that umbrella of the priorities of this university, each individual unit priorities will be able to be flushed up, and we have to make those decisions. Yes.
So I keep hearing about programs and educational opportunities for students and painful decisions that need to be met. What cuts are being made to administration? Because right now I feel like the onus is on the faculty and the educational process here at UND. What cuts are going to be made to administration to help offset this terrible budget shortfall?
Well, I can tell you this, and you may have read it in the newspapers because I've been real clear about this, that every line, every job, every position, every program, every administrator, every office is going to be touched by this budget process. And administration is not exempt. And we certainly will be shaping the administration, you know, based on the requirements of this university. I'm mindful of all the conversation of the administrative bloat comments in Twomley Hall. I'm mindful of the letters that I read to the letters to the editor of the newspaper that say, when I went to school here in 1962, George Starcher had one assistant and his vice president had one assistant, and that was it for the administration. I understand that. I was here at that same time. I went through the whole thing. But today we have federal mandates that say we have to operate under certain guidelines with the federal, it takes administration capacity. We have mandates that say we have to deal with diversity and racism on campus. It takes administrative capacity to do that. We have requirements from the state to operate our scholarship programs and our funding and our waivers. It takes administration to do that. But I can guarantee you this, we will analyze every single administrative position just like we'll analyze every other and make sure that we are spending our money wisely, necessarily, and appropriately for the people of North Dakota and for our taxpayers and for UND. And administration is going to be a part of that deal. I don't worry that administration is going to design the system to save their own jobs. I'm confident that as we go through, the administration is going to provide the direction and opportunity to provide the priorities of this university, and we will reshape the administration appropriately at the same time. Yes, Tom?
Is there someone over there I want to
Go ahead. Well, we got the time. We'll get him.
All right, my question is, when you make the decisions at your office about what programs are priorities and what's are not, are you going to allow for public input and dialogue, like meetings such as this, enough time so people could review your decisions and provide commentary?
Simple answer, no. The reality is I want you to provide that input and that effort as we create the priorities moving up the ladder of the system. We don't have time, unfortunately, to have public comment, to go through collaboration process so that we can meet the needs of the budget. I mean, the reality is we have Bismarck, we have the Capitol, we have the governor's office saying you have these deadlines to get this budget on the table. And we have to meet, we don't have any choice. I mean, we have to meet it. And to do that, we're going to have to work with the trust that Becky was talking about, with the ability to put this system together so that we can make it work. And if we use the decision-making process to set priorities based on the the umbrella of the guidelines that or the priorities that I've announced, if we input the faculty, the public, whoever is going to help build those priorities at the unit level, then we will have the input required to move this up the process and make it happen. And I just think that I don't want to make these decisions at the president's desk with a bunch of public input. I want the input made by faculty, staff, career folks to get this process done. And that's,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean the public at the Grand Forks community, the state community. I beg your pardon. I meant faculty. When I said public, I meant those of us who have a very severe commitment to this university, who've been here through thick and thin, who may have a word for you about if you pick this priority versus this priority, we might say, Mr. President, would you reconsider for these reasons? I don't care what the Grand Forks public thinks. I want you to be able to hear what the people that work for you think.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to take a 3-year process like it took us for the nickname, right? But how about if we do this? When we get the master list, I'm throwing this out as an idea. I don't mean to make anybody over in the front row faint over here. but how about if we do this? When we get the master list of priorities put together that's going to come to my desk, what about if we publish that? What about if we publish that and seek your comments, your information? I'm available. I've got a phone. I've got email. Pat can line you up, come in the office. We've had a lot of people coming in the office already to give me the benefit of their idea of what priorities are. And we're glad to do it. So, how does that work? I think
that's a great idea.
Okay.
It's a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Yes.
Mike Pellet, Atmospheric Sciences. Does the priority of student learning experience extend to both the undergraduate and graduate students?
Yes. Yes, it does. Summer programs too, which I've heard are being cut. I wasn't aware of. But yes.
Hi. Like all faculty members, I'm worried about the impact of this on students and student learning outcomes, as well as faculty. I'm also concerned about the way any potential cuts can have an impact upon staff. We have incredible staff here. We've got phenomenal people all over this university, every possible level. And I was actually really distressed today when I saw the buyout package for staff. And maybe I read what had come out, and it was a quick read. I didn't go to the website, but from my reading of it, I saw staff being offered at most a 50% of 1 year's salary,
Right.
compared to 100% for faculty if they were to take a buyout. No provision for additional insurance. And I don't mean to be overly critical, but I'm so worried about staff morale when we have such incredible staff, and we know that staff are somewhat more vulnerable than those of us who have tenure. I'm not complacent about having tenure, but I think it does give a little bit more protection. And I just wonder about the thought process that goes into making that particular decision. Because that does concern me. It concerns me about the long-term effect on staff morale and morale on this campus in general.
And that's, that's a very good discussion to have. The differences between the two programs, a lot are because of the privileged status of tenured faculty, not all faculty, tenured faculty. That ends up, that privilege includes a right of property. I mean, that's something that the faculty owns. And as you legally deal with the separation of that piece of property, we have to talk about what it takes to make that break. And on a voluntary basis, as we looked at that program, it was felt that we needed to require that larger piece for tenured faculty to be able to make the moves to provide a voluntary separation agreement from those faculty. There's a difference in legal terms between the separation agreement and a retirement program and all those kinds of things. So we're looking at voluntary separation agreements. There are other factors involved with the staff reductions or the voluntary staff program, retirement program. And, you know, we're trying to make it work as best we can. And the one thing that I can assure you is that we're not going to treat these cavalierly. We're going to be humane about how we approach them. And if somebody sees a position that's going to be eliminated a year from now, you know, we're not going to just throw them out the door today. You know, we're going to provide time and opportunity for employees, for those staff employees that have spent their lives here, to be able to move out of those positions in the best way possible. And if we have to provide more dollars to be able to do that appropriately, then we're going to find more dollars in the system. I have to tell you, I mean, there are people, the compassion and heart of this university is just amazing to me. I mean, there are people on this campus who are willing to donate their salary increases to a fund, a pool, that could be used to temper people leaving the system. We're not going to do that. We're not going to ask people to sacrifice their dollars to help. We're going to find the dollars in the system to make it work properly. And we do have some differences legally between tenured faculty and staff, but you know, our attempt is to recognize those, do what we have to do, and make the best possible transitions that we can. Yes?
Melissa Jelsa, Department of Languages and Literatures. I have a question about the timing issue as well, and you've stated for us the 15th of March, the 1st of April, and the 15th of April is our internal deadline. What's the deadline that the governor has asked for our numbers to be at his desk? And how does that match in these two voluntary separation agreement plans that you just mentioned? That information won't become available to any of the units until well after the local units have passed. And so I'm curious to know how you might address the fact of the time discrepancy between when individual units will learn about who is accepted or who's been granted these voluntary separation agreements, and how then that reassures the kind of local control that's left.
The process is twofold in the Capitol. One, our budget has to go to the Chancellor's office to get blended with all of the other budgets from the other 10 universities in our state. Those budgets get massaged in the Chancellor's office, presented to the Office of Management and Budget. The Office of Management and Budget puts their budget together with all state agencies and presents that budget to the governor's office to make the decisions. That process needs to be completed by July 1st. Is it July 1st or?
I think they're trying to extend it
Yeah,
until August.
they're trying to extend it, but basically it's July 1st. And what I can tell you is that we're going to have some discrepancies. We will have some work still being done, but by the time we make these submissions, and we will have the opportunity to, while we present, you know, the top line budget, we'll have the opportunity to go in as this process works through to get to the governor's desk. I've been there, you know, I've gone through it. We'll have the opportunity to make some adjustments to add, you know, or subtract or make sure that the commitments that we've made here at the university are going to be followed through with the chancellor's office and the governor's office. So, it's fluid. It changes. As Alice mentioned, we're trying to get an extension to August before we have to put it in. Don't know if it's going to be granted or not. It's a huge amount of work to deal with all state agencies to put that budget together. And unfortunately, we have a legislative session coming up in January. And, that budget needs to be in place and disseminated, for the governor to give his budget speech, in September or whenever they do it. I don't know. But it isn't black and white. We'll have the opportunity to work the budget a little bit once it's submitted. Yes?
Marcus Weaver, Hightower,
Yes.
professor and chair in educational foundations and research. So at some point in your prepared statement, you talked about students being ensured a path towards timely graduation. I'm a little confused about how that's supposed to happen for a lot of students, especially in departments where the lines that are being lost or frozen are lines that are filled by people with certain expertise. And when that expertise leaves with them, you mentioned things like independent studies or waivers, things like that. How is it that faculty who are left with more responsibilities and without the expertise are supposed to ensure that students are still progressing towards graduation, and especially for those parts of the university that have accreditation and all those kinds of things? You mentioned things like waivers. I mean, there are certainly a lot of departments that just couldn't do those.
Sure. I think it's appropriate that you're confused about it, because I think all of us are. The reality is we don't even know what programs are going to be there or aren't going to be there. We don't know if there's students in a program that gets eliminated, what the requirements might be. We don't know where they are in their pathway to graduation. My point is whether an independent study can be worked out or not, whether a waiver can be used or not, whether other methods can be. The point is we're not going to leave students twisting in the wind. We're going to make sure. I had an email from a student who said, I heard the summer programs were going to be cut. And I hope it's just a rumor. And I emailed her back and said, I hope it's just a rumor too. But her point was that she had plotted out her path to graduation. And she said, if I don't get this summer course that I'm planning on taking, that means I have to take that in the next semester. That means I have to push back another semester, with something else, and that my graduation is going to be pushed back a year from what I had planned on doing, because if I can't take that summer course. That's just not appropriate. I mean, and I don't know of any summer courses that are going to be cut, but if this student's program was going to be cut, we have to find a way to make sure that they can continue to graduate. I don't know what those ideas are, what can be put in place to make that student whole, to visit that graduation time, but we have to do it.
So what's going to be the process for figuring that out? Because obviously students, I don't think, understand, truthfully, that those are the kinds of choices that faculty are having to go through right now to figure out what our priorities are.
I'm hoping when the time comes where we identify if there are going to be any programs that are going to be eliminated, that we can get those answers from you. I don't know. I mean, I don't know them. I mean, you know the students, you know the program, you know what's there. You've got the advisory capacity to those students and how they're working their way towards graduation. I don't know that stuff. We need to get the answers, from those of you who are face to face with those students every day, so that we can do it right for those students. We're not going to put them in a position of saying the required budget adjustments that we need to make are going to hurt you and your ability to graduate. We're not going to do that. Yes?
I promised it's my last question.
I don't think I have anything on the schedule for the rest of the day.
I'm a new I've only been here for 5 years, so, I don't have the experience that Bill does to see the long view here. So my question is, you're a former governor, right? You are a very successful person. I want to advocate on behalf of the music therapy program here at the University of North Dakota because our department does identify it as a priority. So one successful person to a person who wants to be successful, what would you suggest that we do? Call in our community partners? You know, what do we do? Because we have a tremendous amount of community buy-in. What would you suggest that we do to make it known that we do think we're a priority?
What I would suggest is take the 3 overarching policies that we put on the table, articulate how the music therapy program is a priority by meeting those policies, and then start internally championing that issue so that it's set in the priorities where it should be. Personally, as a governor, I was never really moved by public supporters, calling up and saying, this is how you should do your job. I appreciate the fact that you have a lot of supporters and this and that generates the power of a program and the strength and support of a program. It doesn't make it match the priorities. So the articulation has to be, how does it fit and match those priorities of this university based on the principles that we've put forward? That's what's going to make the day. Yes?
Jeff Holm, Chair of Psychology. The question...
You haven't been evaluating me here, have you?
I'm trying not to. Okay. Back when you were governor, I did that all right. I understand the process, I think, as well as probably anybody can, and I appreciate the difficulty in it. But I think some of the questions that you're hearing, I think touch on a bigger issue that I think is very difficult to address. But I do want to encourage you to address it and your administrators to address it down the road. So this isn't really a question, it's more of a comment. When we've gone through this process, departments, at least in our college, departments have identified priorities, identified areas in which they might reduce to 95, 90. Gone to the college has done a similar thing. As you've heard, the college doesn't necessarily agree with the departments in all cases. I assume that's going to work its way up and so forth, and then decisions, as you said, will be made in terms of what meets what priority and that type of issue. And money might be reallocated here or there. I think that there's been a lot of talk about silos in academia, and money is one issue, but there are a lot of resources throughout the university. And as a chair of psych, I can only look at what we have in psych. It says the Dean of Arts and Sciences can only look at what she has in Arts and Sciences. I think that the university has to figure out some way to look across departments, across colleges. There's a lot of people, all the time somebody writes me and says they want to create a new course in their college that has something to do with psychological aspects of life. There seems to be a great need in all these various places for something related to the psychology of, and you can fill in the blank. And that's just one opportunity or one example of opportunities for integration that go missed, essentially, and resources that go untapped. Ways that psychology and nursing and psychology and engineering could work together. And I would hope that in the future we could put together a council of faculty members and administrators that could think kind of outside the box in new ways to try to use those resources effectively across those arbitrary barriers.
That's a great idea. I like it a lot, and I think it's important for the future of this university. We talked earlier about, being able to reduce costs by, spreading them out over a broader picture here. That's important to do, and I think what I've learned here so far is we're starting to develop some models about how to work cross silo or cross unit at the university today. For instance, the Math Emporium program that Dean Storrs is talking about. The Math Emporium is a great idea for math, but it's also for chemistry and for engineering and for all kinds of cross-campus collaboration. And we're looking at another cross-campus thing in entrepreneurialism, as well as psychology being needed in all different kinds of courses. The effort of entrepreneurs today in each area of discipline is important, and that's a way that we can spread out, work better together, come on share administrative costs, or whatever the case may be. Those are a couple of models that we're having already that can work as we go out and create the opportunities for the cross collaboration between units. And I think it's a great idea, and certainly we won't get it done before I leave, hopefully. And but we're leaving the new president with a lot of structure, a new budget, an organizational chart that is going to be tuned up and appropriate, an evaluation of how the administration of the university can work. And I will be glad to add to that list, a committee of appropriate people, to work on this, breaking down the walls and barriers of the silos and creating a fully integrated, completely working unit here at the university that is the university, not just a collection of a bunch of small universities. Yes, sir.
I understand that when the economic times were better, legislature put a lot of money, billions of dollars in the raining fund, and I think it is raining now. And people are not taking the advantage of that. If I understand, governor has taken out some, but that's only interest or the income from it, not the capital. And whatever way you may talk, and I understand and I appreciate. In fact, I am a Democrat, but I appreciate it.
Hey, it takes both sides, right?
I was a citizen when you were governor. One Republican, I appreciate. So I think the higher education should be valued in this state. If you cut and do all these things, then state in the long run may suffer. So it's better to tap some of that rain.
Yes, which is a great discussion. In going to the priorities of higher education, I can't speak for the new governor we're going to have in the next legislative session, but what I can tell you is that when we went through the prioritizing process in the state in the 1990s, the overarching priorities were the health, safety, and education of our people. And education was a top priority. And as we found money in the different ways that we dealt with the budget, we put it into education. I certainly going to be encouraging the next legislative session, the next governor, to be doing the same thing, because I think it's important for our state. And again, it's setting the priorities. I deemed education to be a top priority of the state, and I would hope that that would continue to be a policy in the next administration. A couple of words on the ending fund balances. The legislature built up a budget stabilization program. That is what the governor, who's able to get his hands on those dollars, because some of them are locked up. But in this particular one, this was one that the governor could use. He took $500 million out of that fund, left $75 million in it. One of the contemplations that the governor's office had during this time was You know, do you take $250 million out of it and ask for an 8% allotment instead of a 4% allotment? All those kinds of discussions took place. They decided to virtually deplete that fund and give a lower allotment across the board. The other fund that we see out there is called the Legacy Fund. And the Legacy Fund has several $billion in it, and that is required by law to spin off the interest starting in 2017 to the General Assembly to use on budget means. 15% of the corpus or the capital that's in that fund can be removed at one time by a supermajority of both houses in the legislature. And I'm sure they're going to be searching for those dollars because legislators like to spend money. That's their job. And so they're going to be trying to find those sources of income to lessen the impact on the people of North Dakota. So, there are safety valves in there. There are ways you can find money. But just in this case, in the Budget Stabilization Fund, there wasn't enough money in there to solve the problem. We wish there were, but it wasn't there. Yes, sir.
I'd like to express my appreciation for you coming here today and facing faculty and other folks. I would say that my overall impression has been that this process is more appropriate for a governor named George Sinner, who was the doom and gloom governor in some people's minds. And to get it more to be that like Governor Ed Schafer, it would be helpful if when we were asked, us departments and the faculty, to prioritize and come up with these budgets, if we were also asked to indicate what we would do if our budgets grew 5%, and what we would do if our budgets grew 10%, and how this would enhance the quality of the student experience and the life of the university in its future, so that we could move forward and become a genuine research university. And let us share our vision for the future in a positive way. That's an Ed Schafer's point of view, not a George Sinner.
Thank you. And you know what? I think that's what we're doing. We're not saying that we're going to doom and gloom, cut this money out of your department. We're saying we want to give you more money to put into those priority programs that will increase expenditures, that help increase salaries, that move the classroom facilities to a better place. We're saying we're not cutting your budgets. We're trying to prioritize our dollars so that we have more to spend. I met with the University Senate Budget Committee, and they had put some questions together, and maybe one of them was yours. I don't know. But included in those questions was, have you considered the mental health of the faculty when we're going to ask them to do more with less? And we have. Because the point is, we're not asking any faculty to do more with less. We're asking to do more with more. If we create those dollars and we put them into the priorities, we can see better expenditures and more expenditures on that priority, and that makes a stronger university. So it's kind of a reverse of what you're talking about, but we are trying to generate those dollars and say, if you had a 10% bigger budget, where would you spend them on your priorities? That's what we're doing. We're finding that money to put in to those rankings. And so I'm not trying to parse words, but I think what you suggested is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, we want to increase your budget by 5%, we want to increase your budget by 10%, and we want to put it into the priorities that are important to the direction of this university.
That's great.
Well, I hope you'll join me in thanking our president for this. This will be a conversation to be continued. Thank you all for coming.